Welcome to our Business Owner's Guide videos. Section 8. Financial Health. Cash flow makes or breaks small businesses. In this section, you'll reflect on vital questions about profit margins, costs, financing, and risk management. 8.1 Cash flow management. How do you forecast cash flow for the next 3 to 6 months? What strategies help manage seasonal cash flow fluctuations? How do you balance accounts receivable and accounts payable timing? What cash reserves do you maintain for emergencies? How do you monitor cash flow on a weekly basis? What payment terms do you offer customers? How do you incentivize early or on-time payments? What lines of credit or financing options support cash flow needs? How do you manage inventory investments to preserve cash? What scenarios help you plan for potential cash flow challenges? 8.2 Profit margin analysis. What is your gross margin by product line or category? How do you calculate and track net profit margins? What contributes most to margin compression in your business? How do your margins compare to industry benchmarks? What products or services have the highest and lowest margins? How do discounts and promotions affect your margins? What strategies can improve your overall margins? How often do you review and adjust pricing to maintain margins? What costs could be reduced to improve margins? How do you balance margin growth with market share objectives? 8.3 Cost control strategies. What are your largest expense categories? How do you regularly review and negotiate with vendors? What processes exist for approving expenses? How do you track and allocate overhead costs? What technology investments reduce operational costs? How do you balance quality and cost in purchasing decisions? What benchmarks help identify excessive spending? How do you involve employees in cost-saving initiatives? What sustainable practices also reduce costs? How do you prevent cost cutting from affecting quality or service? 8.4 Financing growth. What internal funding sources support your growth plans? How do you evaluate different external financing options? What relationships do you have with potential investors or lenders? How do you determine the optimal debt-to-equity ratio? What financial projections support your financing requests? How do you plan to use growth capital efficiently? What exit strategies have you considered for investors? How do you assess the cost of capital from different sources? What collateral supports your financing applications? How do you communicate growth plans to financial stakeholders? 8.5 Financial risk management. What financial risks pose the greatest threat to your business? How do you hedge against currency fluctuations if applicable? What insurance protects against significant financial losses? How do you diversify revenue streams to reduce risk? What stress testing scenarios help prepare for downturns? How do you monitor and manage credit risk with customers? What internal controls prevent fraud or financial mismanagement? How do you plan for potential tax liability changes? What contingency plans exist for major financial disruptions? How do you balance risk management with growth opportunities? We have discussed the following: cash flow management, profit margin analysis, cost control strategies, financing growth, financial risk management. You've just completed Section 8, Financial Health. To prepare completely, don't forget the other 9 sections: business foundations, sales strategy, product management, distribution channels, operations management, marketing and customer experience, technology and tools, scaling and growth, compliance and risk. This section uses a question-only format because financial decisions must be customized. These questions prepare you to manage money in ways that strengthen your business's future.